Hey everybody, I'm starting 1 minute early to do a quick mic test because comments will appear here. So if anybody's on, tell me if you can hear me. And thank you all endlessly for your endless patience with my technical limitations, which I'm slowly overcoming. Comments will appear here. Hoping for a comment or two. Can you hear me? Anybody there? I see 4 eyes, so some folks are already here. Um, can you hear me? I've got an alternative if this mic isn't working. Yay! Thanks, Darlene. Hi, Dan. Sounds good? Okay, great. Super. All right. Thank you. That's what I needed. All right. So it's 8 o'clock and give it another minute. Hi, Cora from Holland. How are you, darling? Darlene, where are you from? Dan, where are you from? Teresa, I gotta wear the glasses. Altimos, good evening. Hi, Therese. Therese, yeah. Mariana from Canada. Richie Vaughn, hi. As people sign in, tell us where you are, because we know we're gonna have folks from all over the world now. We've got Canada. I know we're gonna have folks from Australia, and I know it'll be meaningful to them to see where everybody is signing in from. Holland, Cora, of course, always. Jacksonville, Florida. Hi again, Darlene. Thanks. And Dan's in Colorado. Oh, lucky you, Dan. Turning into everybody's favorite state. All right. Hi. Oh, wonderful. Dominic from Ireland. Therese is from Pennsylvania in the United States. Terrific. Great. 25. Gail Gregory. Hi, Gail from Australia. I hope you're safe and that those you know and love are safe. I know those. Okay. Italy. Hi. Irene Ventura from Italy. Hi, Italy. Richie from Kentucky. Fantastic. You know, we really are from all over the world, which is good because we're going to do a little web weaving. I see little hearts floating up. I don't know if you all can see them on your screens, but I see them. This is when I realized my version of my mother, who I could not teach how to put a videotape into a video machine and press on. All right, Richie Vaughn. Okay, so let's get started. It's a little after 8. I know people keep signing on as we go, so I want to thank everybody who's here. I know a lot of folks. Oh, Yoka! Oh my goodness! Also from Holland, a very dear old friend who I'm thrilled that you're here. And hey there, that's Chris and Gail Gregory. Gail, you're safe. Good. I'm sure we're all happy to hear that. Although I know that safe as you are, that I'm sure you're dealing with a tremendous amount of heartbreak and stress. Hi from Medellin, Colombia, Elena Is. Hi, Elena from Colombia, from Medellin. Colombia is beautiful. We really are from all over. Isn't this wonderful? Great. Okay. All right. So global community. I want to talk to you tonight about Australia. And I want us to do a little work, a little collective energy working to send some love and to talk in practical terms about some of the things that we can do as individuals and as practitioners of an earth-based spirituality to try to be of help specifically to folks who are suffering and to the animals and the land that's suffering in Australia. And then how we can think about, hi, Christina from Italy. Ciao, come stai? For us to think about the very practical actions that we can start to take in our daily lives, small things that collectively, if we all participate in, can begin to add up to the kinds of substantial changes that we need to make if we're going to stop these kinds of horrendous crises from afflicting the entire planet what's happening in Australia will happen and has been happening, not as horrifically, but horrifically in Australia. It's going to be happening all over the world, and we're looking at massive changes in climate and the well-being of the planet. And we needed to act 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. We didn't. We need to act now. Hi, Joanne from Vancouver. So I want to talk a little bit about some of those things. And I have some correspondence from folks in Australia uh, that I wanted to share with you, so that we have a more sort of informed sensibility. And so, all right, let's just take a moment. I'm going to not look at who comes on screen because it distracts me, happily, but it distracts me. And I'm going to ask you all just to take a moment, close your eyes. The one thing that is a common characteristic shared by most pagans, witches, Wiccans, indigenous peoples throughout the globe, is an acute sensitivity to our connections to one another and to the land in which we live. And that is increasingly so as we become increasingly skillful at our spiritual work, mindful of its purposes, and sensitive to the greater context in which we're living. And as we do our work, we begin to realize more and more that magic isn't something that we do to manipulate or to control, to work with unseen forces or supernatural forces. Magic is what happens when our minds and our hearts, our souls open to the divinity of the world in which we live, the worlds in which we live, the realms of spirit and the realm of the divine that's embodied by the natural world in which we live. When our hearts open to that, and that connection, that divinity, that energy flows into us and through us into the world. And that's my definition of magic. That's been my experience of magic. That's my understanding of it and how I try to express it. And so the nature of the work that we do opens us. It opens our hearts, and it's impossible when you're open and when you are sensitized, when you are aware of how deeply interconnected you are with the rest of creation in the immediate place where you live, and then in the vaster context that connects you to Lily Moon, who's in Shoalhaven, South Coast, New South Wales, Australia, that we truly are all interconnected and we're interdependent. And so when a tragedy strikes on the other side of the planet, of course, when we're safe in our homes, with our loved ones, with our families, with our familiars, with our gardens and the spaces in which we live, and those places are healthy and beautiful and peaceful, we're protected. We're insulated by the blessed normalcy of where we live. And yet, because of the way in which we work, our hearts open wide, and we know that we're connected, and we feel the pain and we feel the suffering. We talked a little bit about the dark night of the soul. I talked a little bit about the dark night of the soul during winter solstice, and the reality of depression, which pagans rarely talk about, but which is a powerful affliction for those of us whose hearts are open when we experience the pain and the suffering of the world in which we live. And that is inevitable. It is a condition of the world in which we live, and therefore a condition of how we live, who we are when we live in a connected way. So the question is, how do we grapple with that? How do we deal with that? How do we learn to dive beneath the grief, the pain, the sorrow, the overwhelming sense of powerlessness that we experience when we are connected to the world, and therefore sensitive and subject to its suffering? How do we feel and not deny those feelings, but feel them? Because to turn our feelings off is to turn all of our feelings off, right? So we have to be open. We have to be open to the suffering as well. How do we dive beneath it? How do we dive beneath the grief, the feelings of helplessness and hopelessness? I lived with that for a very long time. after the epiphany that I experienced with the Green Man and with Mother Earth, and my everything opened wide up, and the excruciating reality of the damage that we had done, of the death and the pain and the woundedness that we had inflicted in our blindness and our selfishness and our foolishness for thousands of years, overwhelmed me. And I felt utterly powerless in the face of so much woundedness that had to be fixed. And after the grieving and the despair, Mother Earth whispered in my ear, yeah, we have some very heavy feelings to deal with. Exactly. She whispered in my ear, and she said, now, you're not helpful. You're of no use if you're drowning in despair. So you need to pull yourself out of it, or plunge deeper beneath it, and find within yourself the resources to be of value, to be of help, to be of assistance. And she brought me back through the process of breathing, in which I've had this remarkable epiphany that every breath that I took in a mindful way was an intimate connection with the green plants, with the trees all around me. And that every time I exhaled, I was giving them a gift of the breath of life. And when I inhaled, I was receiving that gift of life from them. And so that moment of awareness gave me also a practice, something that I'm doing, that we're all doing constantly, but without awareness, that at any moment in bringing my awareness to what was actually happening in that automatic bodily function, that I was in fact in a profoundly spiritual relationship, intimate, immediate, interdependent, interconnected, full of love, full of life, full of generosity, blessing, and it expanded me out of myself and into the reality of the greater world, living world, conscious world, abundant, generous, benevolent, giving, life-sustaining world in which I was a part. And I was nourished by that, and then came back to life. So there is within us the ability to tap into the magic, which is the magic of Mother Earth. The devastation that's wiping away all of the ecosystems and the precious life that has taken billions of years to create in an exquisite, balanced, reciprocal, healthy, life-sustaining system, a community of life in Australia, which is unique and gorgeous. I've been there a few times and been able to stay for several weeks and was so moved. It's such a beautiful land, and the creatures are so extraordinary, and the people were so kind and wonderful, and the pagan community was so amazing, and it truly is heartbreaking. How does the land recover from that? And we don't fully know. We don't know how. We don't know if. But we do know, especially as pagans, that one of the magics of Mother Earth is her capacity for rebirth. If a species is wiped out, if fabric is torn, can it recover? We know that we are at a breaking point. We know that we are at a moment where the damage is so severe that systems may not be able to recover, and that magic of being able to heal and be reborn and rebirth life is now at risk. And the devastation in Australia, we don't know yet, but there may be species that were rendered extinct by these terrible fires. We know that the koala population, apparently almost half of it, maybe more when they're done figuring, has been wiped out and is already endangered. They're the most extraordinary creatures. And the heartbreak of our madness, of our life in our mirrored towers, and our indifference to the other creatures is that in our stupidity, if we don't know how to live here, then we don't belong here. Okay, so our extinction may be necessary. The problem is the extinction of all these innocent and perfect creatures with us. So we have this great responsibility. We have this great sensitivity, which opens us to the pain and the suffering of the world. And we have this great responsibility that's shared by all of us, and especially by pagans and witches, and practitioners of revivals of indigenous traditions. We have an acute sense of our own responsibility. So what do? How do we deal with the grief? How do we deal with the sense of despair? How do we deal with the sense of hopelessness about the overwhelming task ahead of us? The first thing, and forgive me, I know I ramble a little, and because I don't really prepare with notes, and I probably should, but I know you're all very patient, and I'm grateful. I think one of the first things is to recognize there's a very old indigenous wisdom that in order for a shaman and witcha, wise one, it's a 5,500-year-old word that goes back to the shamanism of the our Indo-European ancestors, where the word comes from. They were the shamans of their people. To be meant wise one, witcha meant wise one, a seer, a shaman. And it's a very ancient indigenous wisdom that to be a healer, which was one of the roles of witches, of wise ones, you must be wounded first. You can't heal until you're wounded. And when I look back personally on that long, terrible period of grief and despair and depression and powerlessness, I now realize it was a necessary wounding in order to heal, in order to learn how to heal, in order to bring what I learned to other people, and to participate then, to learn from the earth itself in how it heals, and to participate in that healing. I truly believe that everything we need to heal ourselves, to heal from fear and terror and depression and hopelessness in the face of this vast task and this tremendous suffering and destruction that we have to address, that everything we need is within us. It's in our DNA. It's in our essential nature. And it's in nature all around us that completely surrounds and is intimately a part of us, because we are a part of nature. And that everything we need, then we can gain access to. And one of the blessings of doing the work, the spiritual work that we do, is that the techniques, right? The tools and the techniques are not about manipulation. They're not about control. They can be about manifesting good lives and prosperity and love and all the things, that baby witches start out very preoccupied with, as I did, certainly. Oh my God, it was marvelous. And over the years, I began to see the bigger picture, right? The bigger purpose, the bigger wisdom, the bigger skill set, the reason for why we were doing what we were doing, why we were working in the four directions and above and below, why we cast a circle, why we used the practices, how they opened us, our consciousness and our hearts, our souls and our beings, to realms of spirit to which we in fact have access, to learn, to heal, to work with spirit beings, to work with the spirits of the land, to learn from them, to receive blessings, to understand about healing, the healing powers of plants and places of power, and working with the elements, working with, not using, working with the elements to expand our sense of self from the smallness of ego and who we are in our individual beings into the larger matrix of life that we are interconnected with, like with every single breath that we take, or water, every sip of water that we drink. The context from which to derive the wisdom that we need to live in the right way, in a way, in what Native Americans often call the medicine way, right? When they talk about medicine, they're talking about a life that is a healthy life, innately healthy life, because it's a life of reverence and respect and balance and reciprocity. It's a life that is opened to the divinity of the world, the natural world in which we live, and our intimate interrelationship with that as part of it. And so medicine is the right way of living, what Buddhists call, right living, right thinking. And so what we need is all around us. The techniques are the means by which we take off the blindfold and start to see it, to see the beauty and the wisdom and the balance, the laws of nature, which are spiritual laws, which will help us to begin to live in the right way. So, okay, so let's talk about a couple of things. Australia. So we're intimately connected. We're on the other side of the globe. I mean, we couldn't be more on the other side, right? We're on the northern hemisphere, and on the opposite side, it takes almost 24 hours to get to Australia. But we're connected. We're deeply intimate. Thanks, Catherine. We are deeply, intimately interconnected. So I know that what we do here affects what happens there, just as what they do there affects what happens here. So there's the spiritual web and there's the practical web, and to me, they are, in fact, the two sides of the same coin. They're one. They're one. That the old patriarchal model was spirit was this and matter was that. Energy, transcendent, divinity, transcendent, earth, less than, body, less than, fallen from grace, all that nonsense, right? Hey, Leo. Reality, two are one. Two aspects of the same whole. Energy, embodiment. It's like light, right? So, everybody in the New Age movement talks about, or used to talk about, light. Is it a particle or is it a wave? Is it energy, right? Or is it a thing? Is it a particle or is it a wave? Is it energy or is it expression? The answer is yes, it's both. And that's part of how magic works, is the movement of energy into embodiment and from embodiment back into energy. So we're intimately connected through spirit and through the natural world with our brothers and sisters and all of the plants and all of the animals in Australia. We're not suffering the way they are. We're not breathing the air that they're breathing there, and that air is thick with smoke in not all of Australia, but in huge swaths of it. And in a certain sense, it will come to all of, that air will circulate across the planet. We're connected materially because the amount of greenhouse gases that we generate here through the burning of fossil fuels, the amount of red meat that we eat here, the amount of heat that we use and oil and gasoline that we put in our cars, the new clothes that we purchase that use up resources, our diets, what we consume to live, to eat, and for comfort and pleasure, that all of those things are contributing to the greenhouse gases that are contributing to the warming of the planet. And this abnormally hot summer, because they're experiencing summer. We're in winter on the northern hemisphere, they're in summer. And these storms, the fires themselves are creating their own environmental conditions, their own climate, because they're so hot. 120 degrees, staggering heats, and they're creating their own environmental crises within the environmental crisis. So what we do here on a daily basis is affecting the lives that they're living there. And it's also true in California. I'm on the east coast of New York. The storms that we had with Sandy, it was a massive storm, and New York City was flooded, and people died. And I sold my home. I know I've mentioned this before. I sold my home last year, which was on the water. I thought I would spend the rest of my life there. I'm on the eastern end of Long Island. It's a beautiful largely rural and fishing community. And I thought I would spend the rest of my life there. And in the 17 years that I owned that home, the waters had risen significantly. And I sold it and I moved to high ground. Which doesn't mean that Long Island will be safe. It might not be. So we're all affected no matter where we are, and we all affect each other no matter where we are. So what are the things that we can do? From let's talk a practical point of view, right? Choices about which I started to talk about. So I want to just circle back to that for a moment, because the things that we are doing, the daily choices that we are making, add up to major impact. And I think that one of the things that we can do that can begin to help us to pull out of the grief, out of the despair, out of the depression, out of the feelings of hopelessness and powerlessness. Some of it are spiritual practices alone and in community of other pagans and other witches, and indigenous peoples who welcome us, and across the globe, because tonight, we are a global community now. So working spiritually, coming together as a community, even just speaking one another, knowing that you're there, listening and sharing your comments, and hopefully then taking some of what's shared tonight and making good use of it, knowing that we're not alone. Because some of the comments that I've read from folks in Australia is this terrible feeling of abandonment and isolation, the overwhelming fear. I mean, this helplessness that whatever we're feeling, imagine that you are in the epicenter of the crisis, how much magnified it is, how terrifyingly magnified. So it's important, I hope, that that will be communicated, and that they will know that they are not alone, that there is a global community of pagans who are aware and who care, and whose hearts are open, and who are sending love, and who are sending energy. And we'll talk a little bit this evening. We'll conclude by doing some energy work together. We're not going to do weather work, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we come to that moment. Let's talk about some of the practical things that we can do. If we're in Holland, if we're in Colombia, if we're in Canada, if we're on the east end of Long Island, what are some of the things that we can do? And these are small actions. And one of the things that I learned from the mother when I was being pulled out of this terrible depression was that small things matter. A single breath was the thing that dispelled the weight of this despair. It was a single inhalation, and the realization, the epiphany, which was so glorious and gorgeous, that I wasn't alone, that I was connected to the entire plant kingdom, and that with every exhalation, I was giving back in kind for this blessing of life that they are giving me. A single breath. The divine is a breath away. It truly is a breath away. Our connection to the divine, to the web of life, is a breath away. Small things. So what are some of the small things that we can do? One of the small things we can do, you can go to The Wild Hunt. Just published an article 2 days ago written by a young woman, Josephine Winter. She helped create the Pagan Collective of Victoria in Australia. And I don't know whether she is on or not. She said she was going to check in. If she is, welcome, Josephine. And I'm so glad that you are such a smart activist. And she wrote a really terrific piece. She's a good writer. And it's in the marvelous wildhunt.org, which is such a valuable community organ that really weaves a web of connection across the globe for witches and pagans and revivalists of indigenous traditions. She wrote a lovely piece. It's called Acts of Kindness and Love. I mean, a lovely piece. It's heartbreaking, but she gives you a good review of what's happening as of the date when she wrote this 2 days ago, that 25 million acres of land had burned so far. That thousands of people have been evacuated from their homes. A lot of those homes have burned, many of them in the dead of night. I know the Navy came and rescued people who were trapped on the shores because the fires had burned down to the water. The Victorian coastal town of Malakuta was cut off by bushfires. The Navy was called. They evacuated 4,000 people. The imagery, I'm assuming that Victoria chose the imagery. I don't know. There's a photograph of the afternoon sun in Gosford, New South Wales, that was taken in November by Rob Russell, because these fires have been burning for a long time. I mean, we're just sort of really understanding it in other parts of the world, but this has been going on for months now. It's a staggering photograph. And it looks like the fires of hell burning, and the sun is obscured in this orange sky. The bushfires, I'll just read you a little, but you should go and take a look at the article. The bushfires have been caused by these long periods of drought. This is what was happening in California. And the fire crews have been struggling to contain the blazes. They've been huge, and they have amalgamated, is how she put it, into mega fires. In some regions, they've grown so large that they're creating, and so hot that they're creating their own weather systems, their own weather patterns. And these include dry thunderstorms and lightning, which produces more bushfires in a what you call tinder dry landscape. The smoke can be seen from space, and it's reached New Zealand, and apparently it's reached South America. I don't know if you can see it in Colombia. I'd be surprised, but it's blanketed many parts of Australia, and people are wearing face masks. In Canberra, in Melbourne, in Sydney, cities that are just extraordinary, wonderful, magical, beautiful cities. Thousands, probably millions of people are at this point are experiencing respiratory and other health issues. And it, as she said, so much smoke has been produced that it's expected to travel around the earth and make its way back to Australia. All things are connected. Homes and buildings have been destroyed. To quote, there's a quote, pagan elder that she quotes who lives in one of the areas, and he posted on social media, one of the major impacts of the bushfires and living in a declared disaster area is that I don't think I will ever feel completely safe again. Everything is topsy-turvy. Every day is Groundhog Day. I struggle to manage the most basic things. Decisions and responses that were once almost reflex are almost impossible. My mind and emotions are paralyzed. I've seen the best and the worst of human nature. I've seen and experienced things I hope I never see again. The ongoing effects, subtle and not so subtle, are mind-blowing. That isn't necessarily a bad thing if you can just come to terms with a new mindset. And of course, this is the point, the idea of wounding, that the wounding becomes the vehicle of the healing. So he's making his way through this process. Things we in Australia take for granted. We all do, right? Safety, professional help in dangerous situations, civil order, access to electricity and clean water, food, and petrol supplies. None of it can be guaranteed. At the end of the day, we only have our own capabilities and the goodwill of neighbors and the immediate community to survive. At the end of the day, we are alone. So this is, to me, is key. Certainly that was how I felt. And standing in my front yard as the waters from Sandy approached my front door, and the full moon appeared from behind the rain clouds, and I didn't know whether the water would flood the house. I was alone, and I felt acutely alone. I was cut off. I knew that the fire department couldn't reach us. We were literally cut off from access by high water, and it is frightening. And I know that saying you're not alone, he's still physically alone, but he's not, and none of us is. And even in the moment, if we are cut off by these extraordinary circumstances, these horrific conditions that are now becoming more common and widespread, one of the critical things for us to understand is that we are not alone. That it may feel like it in the moment of the crisis, and in the sense of our being alone and having to cope with it, we are, but we exist within a larger context. That's part of our obligation as a community, and we are connected as a community of pagans and indigenous peoples and witches, and practitioners of Euro-Indigenous revivals, but we're not alone. And I'm very grateful for you all being here. So because we're not alone, all of us, wherever we are, have these obligations. So what are some of the things that we can do, right? So we have a sense from that. There's a lot more here about the Ligurian bees and the animals that are suffering. But rather than spend more time on that, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we can do that can make a difference. All right. The pagan organizations respond. So the Pagan Collective of Victoria released a statement. So you'll be able to read much of it, if not all of it, on this wildhunt.org article. And you'll also be able to read it on their Facebook page, so you should check it out. And they talk about what it means to be a pagan and to be in the midst of a crisis of this sort. And they talk very much about what pagans are doing in Australia to be of help to local communities. There was a group. There's a group of pagans and pagan businesses gotten on board with campaigns to provide resources to those who are working with injured animals. When wildlife rescue organization Wires released patterns for sewing pouches to keep injured baby wombats, wallabies, kangaroos, bandicoots, gliders, and possums safe and warm, many witches rose to the challenge. In the Melbourne shop Muses of Mystery, they hosted a witchcrafternoon for anyone who was interested in creating the pouches. And they got together, and the store was supplied the fabric and other materials, and attendees also donated what they could. And they have a photograph of everybody stitching together. And one of the quotes, the event description: "Our hearts are breaking with news and graphic images of millions. Now it's more than 1 billion animals that have perished in this fire, and many more who've been brutally wounded and who need care." In Queensland, where there's less immediate evidence of bushfire emergency, the 33, it says THR 333-fold proprietor, Eric Adish, told the Wild Hunt that people weren't seeing the effects as much. And so there was almost this sort of blindness to it. But that, in fact, that lack of awareness of how close it was really motivated him. And it's not enough, as he said, for people to send thoughts and prayers, although we're going to send energy. It's important for people to start to take concrete actions that are going to make a difference. So some of those concrete actions are listed in the Wild Hunt article and on the Pagan Collective Victoria Facebook page. And I put it on, you'll see it down below this, on I moved it over to my Facebook page, which is where you are, and you'll see it below. There's a long list of places that people can make donations to. Fire relief for First Nations communities, the South Coast Fire's Indigenous Response, the Fire Relief Fund for First Nations communities. It's a GoFundMe. But there are volunteer firefighters, the Country Fire Authority in Victoria. The links are all there. For wildlife rescue, Animals Australia is helping distribute funding to rescue organizations around Australia as needed, and funding to vets so that they can travel to fire-affected areas. I don't know about you, but every time I see an image of these animals, I've been doing a lot of crying every time I see it. But then, it's like, okay, pull yourself together. What are you going to do? Donations for sure. And for those of you who are able, and that's one of the things that I'm able to do, and that's what I've been doing. The Rescue Collective, it's a group of rescue organizations that have been banding together, and they've been doing amazing work with bushfire survivors in Queensland and New South Wales. The Wildlife Victoria is helping animal victims of the Victoria bushfires. Wires is helping animal victims in New South Wales. Savam, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, in South Australia, those are vets who are working to save animal populations on Kangaroo Island, which has been devastated. And they don't have any external funding, so they're relying on donations to help these threatened populations. And then there are, of course, the Red Cross for general bushfire release, and something called Give It, which facilitates donations of items that people need. So if you're in the Australia area, that's one of the ways that you can give instead of giving cash. So thank you, Josephine. And Josephine wrote and was very specific about, because we wrote, Chris Fielding, my amazing night. I asked him to reach out to her and to ask her if there was anything specific that she would like us to discuss tonight. And she wrote back and she thanked us for our kind thoughts. And she said, the crisis is ongoing and many people are struggling, lost property, terrible air quality with these freak storms that have been generated by the pyrocumulonimbus clouds and these heat patterns that have been generated by these terrible fires. And she says it's easy to feel siloed off from the rest of the world in Australia. I know that's one of the things I actually liked about it, but yes. And the feeling that we aren't alone really means a lot. So Victoria, I'm glad that we were able to gather a small world community here today to let you know that you're not alone. And I know that everybody who's participating is going, we're all done, in addition to the work that we're going to do in a few minutes, that everybody's going to find some action to be of assistance to Australia specifically. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about specific actions we can take that will be of value for the global community. These are a few things that she'd like me to mention on the live stream, okay? So she talks about a lot of people doing, that a lot of pagans are doing spells and working for rain. And this is one of the things that I'm glad that she mentions, because it's one of the things that, as I said at the beginning, I don't do weather working. I don't think that that's an appropriate way to provide assistance. We don't know people's intentions, as she says. We know people's intentions are good, but rain is not the fix-all people think it is. Exactly. Recent rains have washed toxic ash into the waterways, killing fish and endangering water mammals, such as the platypus. The fires are unprecedented and are burning so hot and over such large areas that rain is not doing much to stop them. If folks want to do workings for the fires, they'd be better off sending support to the brave firefighters, many of whom are volunteering, and the animal crisis workers. Similarly, it's not appropriate to be asking for Aboriginal rain rituals. No, this is not something that we would ever do, and that our community wouldn't do. We understand about cultural appropriation. Australia is a continent which is home to many unique Indigenous nations, each with their own unique stories and customs. Fires are burning across many separate Aboriginal nations, so there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to local spirits, of course. Furthermore, it's important not to appropriate an aspect of the culture of First Nations people. I'm perhaps some of you in this community don't know that, but it's good that she's reiterating, because she doesn't know that we would know that. And if you don't, she's articulated it very well. Furthermore, it's important not to appropriate any aspect of the First Nations people. When it comes to supporting, concrete donations are going to do more than thoughts and prayers right now, of course, even if it's just $1 or $2. We have a government who won't acknowledge that climate change is real because they receive so much money from the coal mining. This is one of the ironies of Australia in this situation, is that a huge percentage of gross national product is in fact derived from the export of coal. And so the government, which is a very conservative government right now, is not taking necessary actions. They're in denial mode, as we are in this country. Our firefighters are hugely underfunded, and we're unprepared for the ferocity or sheer size of some of these fires. We've seen that in California here as well, so I understand that. I'm not sure if you've already seen it, but I've published a piece on the Wild Hunt a few days ago, outlining the ways in which our pagan organizations are responding. The Pagan Collective of Victoria is a statewide pagan nonprofit group in Victoria, that's Southeast Australia. But there are lots of other great things happening in other parts of the country too. So that's wildhunt.org 2020. Look up Acts of Kindness and Love, Australian Pagans Respond to the Bushfire Crisis. Great title. She says, thank you again. And she said she'd try to tune in, and that she'd share it with other community members. So the thing to do is absolutely take a look at the Wild Hunt article, take a look at the Facebook page for the Pagan Collective of Victoria for all of those listings. If you're able to in any way, as she said, even $1 or $2, it's remarkable. Really tiny donations can add up, when made by large numbers of people, can add up to large sums of money that can really make a difference and be of major assistance. So let's talk more pragmatic actions that we can also take. Meatless Monday. Turns out that eating meat, that raising cows and eating meat is a major contributing factor to climate change, to global warming. And so many of you may already be vegan or vegetarians. One of the things that we have done long time ago, and we're trying to accelerate it in a more healthy way, to be more attentive and not just have pasta night, but to look more seriously at nutritional value, is to move away from meat, at least one night a week if you can do it. Find a good, healthy, preferably locally grown if you're able to do that, or as close within a small radius so that you're not requiring things to be imported from the other side of the world, not to eat blueberries in the winter, that sort of thing, right? To eat what is indigenous and what is seasonal, what's local if you can do it, and to not eat meat, and to try to do it at least, if you can do it once a week, one night where you are, one day where you are not eating any meat, you're going to be making an enormous contribution. And if we all do it, all those singular contributions will add up. You see me sitting here in my heavy sweater, which is used. I buy a lot of my clothes. When I need new clothes, I buy used clothing so that natural resources are not being used to make new clothing, but I'm recycling and reusing. So the heat's down. We're in winter, and it's been pretty cold the last couple of days. When we bought the new home, we made sure that we had southern exposure on most of the house. And during the daytime, even on a cold day, like today was 20 degrees, the heat is low, very low, and barely on. And we're blessed. We can't afford to put solar panels on right now, and we have too many trees in the summer that keep the house cool, but solar. So finding ways to cut your thermostat and not turn on your air conditioning in the summer, open the windows and allow the prevailing breezes to blow through, makes a huge difference. Once again, if you can't afford to buy an electric car, which a lot of people can't, they're expensive right now. One of the things I do when I have to go to New York, I just took a little break. Some good news, by the way, parenthetical. We finished the drawings, and I finished the text for the new Witch's Wisdom Tarot, which will be out in October. I was really exhausted. And we took a few days and we went into New York City so that I could get a little culture. And we took the bus. We did not take the car. We took our luggage, went down to the bus station, got on the bus, and went into town with whatever it was, 50 other people on the bus. And that's how we came home. We took public transportation. So another way of cutting back on greenhouse gas contributions, of cutting your carbon footprint. There are tons of examples. I won't take up too much more of your time because we've only got about 15 minutes left. But making a decision to commit yourself to one action that will cut your footprint, your carbon footprint, and doing it reliably and consistently. If everyone does that, the contribution is enormous. The impact, just as the impact of all this endless burning and consumption is having an enormous, horrific impact on Australia, as we begin to dial all of that back, we dial back the impact. It's going to take a while for everything to reset, and we only have 8 years now to begin to do this, to cut back on greenhouse gas emissions. But if we do it, we will stop this from happening. It will continue over the next 8 years, but it will not become cataclysmic. Well, it is cataclysmic. It won't get worse. We will not rupture the web to the point where the planet is no longer able to sustain life. We're going to go through a very difficult period. This is the period that has been long prophesied, and we're in it now. And it's happening more harshly and more rapidly than was predicted because people didn't fully understand the dynamics of it. They still don't. But we do know small actions make an enormous difference when they're undertaken consistently by millions of people across the globe. So make a decision, pick something. If you're already vegan, then recycle, reuse, clothing, whatever it is. Cut back on, use public transportation, find ways of using bicycle, things of that sort. Go online, take a look, put recommend, if you have suggestions, if there are things that you're doing, if you have ideas that you want to share, put them up here, put them on my Facebook page. Share them here, and we'll disseminate them. We'll put them in the newsletter that goes out periodically. I'll put them in my letter, and we'll send them out to folks so that people can start to take specific, concrete, or natural actions that will make a difference. And if we all start to do it, it will cumulatively make the difference that can save the planet. Okay, so let's talk, because we have a few more minutes, and not just talk about, let's do a few simple things. I'm not big on doing weather magic because it comes, if one is going to do weather magic, rather than attempting to control, you ask. It is entirely about making offerings, of opening the heart to be the vessel, and of making offerings to the greater wholeness in which you are participating, to make an offering of your love, of your capacity for healing, of your energies of rebirth, of your goodwill, of your desire to heal, to help, to make whole again. That energy is offered, and it then goes, right, in a sort of a natural flow. It goes to where it's needed and is made use of in the ways that are needed by the environment, the ecosystem, the community. I actually prefer community, the community to which you are sending it, right? And so just as you take material actions, which have a material impact, we take spiritual actions that have a spiritual impact, and that then hopefully, have influence on the material circumstances, just as material actions have profound impact on our souls and our spirits. I mean, that act of breathing, which was a physical action, totally transformed my spirit, opened, healed, nourished, sustained, and rebirthed my spirit. So similarly, when we give energy physically and spiritually, when we give energy into the spiritual web of life, it will travel to where it's needed and be used in the ways that it is needed by the spirits of the place, by the spirits of the land itself, by the creatures of the land, by the firefighters who are there, by the people who need healing, that it will flow to them in this sacred and appropriate way, and they will take from that energy what they need to work with it in the way that they need, right? So rather than you saying, I'm going to do work to send rain to Australia, the work is to send love, healing, sustaining energies, encouraging energies, rebirthing energies, healing energies for the land, for the animals, for the people, for the spirits of the place, for the spirits of the people, for the spirits of the animals, for the spirits of the animals that have died, and the people who have died, and the land that has to some extent died, to send the energies of love for those who've crossed over, to help them, to send the energies of love for rebirth where that's possible, and for healing where that's possible, so that there is a well of love and energy from which this healing and this rebirth and this crossing over can go forward. One of the ways of doing that is to work with water, not as a rain-making ritual, but as a way of carrying the energy to those who need it. So one of the things when we were working on this deck, we journeyed for every card. And the first journey that I took, and that Danielle took, my artist, the artist who worked with me on this deck, Danielle Barlow, wonderful artist. The first thing that we did, without knowing that either one of us was doing this, we both journeyed and we both asked what we needed to know to create this new witches deck. And we were both told the same thing. We were told not to work with symbols, not to work with swords and cups and all that stuff, to work directly with the elements themselves. Of course, it makes perfect sense, right? Especially as it turned out. I mean, I've been working shamanically for 40 years. She's been working as a hedge witch and shamanically for 20 years, which I love. in Dartmoor, England. Of course, it makes sense. And almost immediately, as we worked with each of the elements, we discovered things. They showed us things about the elements that we did not know. Um, 40 years of working with them, and they showed sides of themselves and purposes, wisdoms, blessings, gifts. They were no longer metaphors as they are from the writer deck of the human condition. They had intrinsic value. They had of course, they had their own wisdom, their own purpose, their own ways of being, which are in fact a part of us because all of the elements are a part of us as we are part of nature. And so they offered us a view of themselves, and in so doing, we began to see ourselves in a more holistic way. We began to see the missing parts of ourselves. One of the things that we learned about qualities about the Met I hadn't realized before is that water is not just the element of love and of healing and of dreams and of the womb. It's a messenger. It's a messenger because it travels everywhere. The rains, right, that come from the clouds go into the earth and then are carried throughout the earth and in streams and underground and up through the plants and then back up into the heavens and then carried across the globe, and then they fall, where they go. And, as the conditions of the earth, where there are mountains and the clouds drop the rains, and this exquisite, perfect, gorgeous, wise, organic whole in which we reside, with all of its vast wisdom of how to work in such a way that all living beings are making the world a better place when they're taking care of themselves. That water is, of course, the element of love, although we also saw that air was the element of love. But the water is a messenger, and it is very much the element of emotion and feeling, but of embodied feeling. Not, oh, I feel, feeling, the depth of one's being, which is where we all are now with this terrible crisis that is manifesting in these terrible ways around the planet right now, so dreadfully in Australia. But rather than putting sorrow and asking water or using water to cleanse ourselves, to carry away our grief, to carry away our sorrow, or trying to do magic to make rains go to Australia to rain. No. I'm going to ask you, we don't have time for you to go into it now, but in 5 minutes, when this is done, if you'll take a moment and do this incredibly simple practice, small glass of water, you can go directly outside, or you can into the bowl, and then you take the bowl outside. To hold the glass of water, to honor it as a sacred element that sustains your life and the life of the planet. It is precious, and without it, nothing can live. And to acknowledge it as a messenger that travels across the world, carrying everything that's put into it, which is one reason that we need to stop and not simply dump our toxins and our wastes and our sorrows into the water. We'll talk more about purifying with water another time. But right now, the idea is to take the water, to hold the water, and to put your love and your prayers and your energy for healing and for rebirth into the water, knowing that what you put into the water will be carried throughout the world. So you hold it, you can hold it to your heart. Take all the time that you need. Just be really present with what you're feeling. If you feel grief and despair, wait, yeah, and put that to the side and focus on your capacity to share the love and the hope and the certainty in the power of Mother Earth to heal herself and to heal her children. focus on your desire to participate in that, to help, to assist, to lend yourself to the well-being of Mother Earth and all of her other children, and especially those who are suffering in Australia, the land, the people, the human people, the animal people, the plant people, the spirit beings, the spirits of those who died in this cataclysm, to send them your love, a piece of your capacity to heal, your desire for them to recover, for the land to be healed and reborn, your sincerity, and the strength that you have in that love and that gratitude that you feel for the life that you've been given in its beauty and its safety right now, and the well-being that you have, to share your well-being with them so that they'll recover. And then you take it outside and you offer it to Mother Earth. And you allow it to go from your heart into the heart of Mother Earth, knowing that water travels across the planet and that it will go to where it's needed. Right? And so you make your offering of your love and your desire to help heal and your commitment to continue to work for the healing and the well-being of the planet and the other creatures, your brothers and sisters, the plants and the animals that you share the planet with, and the planet itself. And you pour the water into the earth. And you know that all of the blessings that you have offered will be carried to those who need it. And then, hands on the earth, come back in and act in accord. When I finish up with you now, one of the things I'm going to do is go to one of these websites that Josephine listed in her article, and that's on the Facebook page. And I'm going to make another small donation, but I know that small donations matter. So I just want to thank you all for being here with me tonight, and with our brothers and sisters, the other folks in our community who are suffering in Australia. And I know that you are all joining me in sending them good energy so that they don't feel isolated, and they don't feel overwhelmed, and they don't feel despair, and they don't feel fear. Or if they do, that they know that they will come through that, and that there are those who are standing with them, and that you'll join me in taking some concrete actions that will make a difference to them in Australia, and that'll make a difference to the planet. That's what it means to be a wise one. That's what it means to be part of this community. I'm really grateful that you've been here tonight with me, and to Josephine and to all the folks in Australia. We send thoughts and prayers, but we're going to take concerted action. We're going to act in accord with our magic and with the energy that we're sending. We're going to send it in concrete form. So blessed be. I'll see you all in a month. Have a good Imulk. It's a wonderful holiday of light and life and joy in the belly and the stirring of new life. And in these dark and difficult times, it's important to know that that you're not alone, and that you are always connected to a web of life, which is beautiful and wise and nurturing and capable of healing, and which has a wisdom which is divine and which is holy. And so until we meet again, I send you love, and I send you blessings, and I hold you in my heart. Blessed be. Bye, everybody.